What's up and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys on how to fix your Xbox One controller if it stopped functioning and it does not power back on. Now, my issue with my controller was it was plugged in directly into the PC using a micro USB cable, which was plugged into the port right here at the top and then into the USB port in my PC. Now, I've been gaming like that for a long time with this controller, and I never had this issue where it just decided to switch off. Halfway through the game, the controller died out. Now, the controller was not powered on by using any sort of batteries because it was plugged directly into the port as I just showed that, and it just switched off. Now, the reason why that occurred was that it started overheating. So if you notice that the controller has switched off and it isn't switching back on, and if you leave it plugged in to your PC or to your Xbox, you will notice after 5 to 10 minutes, a part within the controller, somewhere on the controller, it's actually getting hot. So this area here by the D-pad is where I actually noticed that the controller was starting to feel a little hot, but it wasn't powering on. So it was trying, but it wouldn't power back on. I couldn't see a light. I tried everything. I mean, I held this down for as long as I could, 1 minute, 2 minutes. I'm sure you guys might have done the same sort of troubleshooting steps. I held this with the menu buttons. I tried everything, whatever I could. I mean, it just wouldn't power on. So, but by judging that it was hot in this area here, that meant there was a problem with the controller. And the only way that we were going to be able to fix this was to open up the controller and take a look inside and find out exactly what was overheating. So normally when I do a video, I do a live troubleshooting. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. I've actually resolved the issue with this controller. It is fixed, but I'm just going to run you guys over on what the issue was and how I tackled that and how did I fix that issue. So as you can see right here, there's a very small capacitor. Now this was a capacitor that was overheating within the controller over this part of the controller where I just mentioned that it was overheating. So all I had to do was find out the capacitor which was overheating and then remove that capacitor from the controller. Now, the function of this capacitor was to distribute power evenly to the controller to make sure that there isn't too much ground noise. I know it doesn't really make sense whenever I say ground noise. It's not actually noise that you can hear, but it's just it's sort of a measurement that the controller takes into consideration. So it just passes good level of electricity to the controller, as you might say, or just a level of electricity to power on the controller. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but it's a sort of like a technical way of explaining this. But in other words, you could say that this thing would be restricting power to the controller should there be a fault on board. So there is a motherboard within this controller here, and the capacitor was seeing that there was an issue, and hence it wasn't allowing the controller to power back on because it was restricting the power flow into the controller. So that was my issue, and by removing that, I was then able to fix the controller. So I'm just going to show you on how to do that. So the first step was that we had to actually open up the controller, and to do that it's a little bit tricky because there are these sort of screws right here. They're not the normal type of screws that you might find, so they're not Phillips head or the plus shaped. They're not flathead and Phillips head. Sorry, it's not your regular screwdrivers or screws. These are called, I think they're called T8s. They're Torx, and they have there's like a thing in the middle as well. It's kind of difficult for the camera to pick this up, but if it focuses on this a little bit, you can't really see because I've actually damaged the middle thing in here. It was in between the screwdriver there, but obviously I try to open it up by using just a normal home Phillips screwdriver, which I will demonstrate shortly. But you need to remove these 5 screwdrivers, and then later on you need to remove the T. So these are called T8s and these are called T6. So T6s and T8s. You remove the T8s first to access the internal parts of the controller, and then you go into removing the other 2 T6s, and then you can get into finding the capacitor, which is here, and then you can eventually remove that by knowing which one it is and which one is faulty and which one is overheating. So back to the controller. and how would you open the controller. So flip the controller upside down and you'll notice that it has these two bumpers attached here. Not bumpers, sorry, the grips on the side. So these are sort of like the grips, and in order for you to remove them, you need to find the smallest possible Phillips screwdriver that you might have at home, and you need to put that into one of the edges right here and force it out from one end, another end, and another end, and then you have this one out. And the same goes for this one here. So once you have these plastic bumpers, or whatever you want to call them, edges removed, you can then focus on finding where the screws are. So what Microsoft has done is they've put two screws right here, two screws over here. So there's one screw right here. Let the camera focus. So there's one screw that goes in here, and you remove that screw from here. And then there's another screw that goes back at far back here. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's deep down in here, so you need to remove that screw. And the same for the other two, for the other side. So there's one here and one right up here. And then the final screw is a little bit tricky because if you see here, there is like a sticker on it, and in order for you to access the screw, it's here in the middle. As you can see, I've just torn through that. What I wouldn't recommend this if you have a brand new controller and it's just under a year. So if you bought a brand new controller and it's under a year old, and should you experience an issue like this, you can just contact Microsoft and they'll replace it under warranty, because it is a hardware issue, and it should be resolved by the warranty. However, this controller is about 2-3 years old now, so I mean I don't qualify for a warranty, and hence why I had to just go in and rip this sticker here, and then you finally access the last screwdriver here. And once you remove that, the control comes apart. You can pull off the top bit, so you remove the top bit, and then you can see that it's exposed on the top. And what you can do finally to pull out the bottom bit, it's a little bit tricky because you need to keep an eye out over here for the battery, where you plug the batteries in. Sometimes they might get caught up, and in order for you to successfully pull this out, you might have to push it down a little bit. So you put a bit of pressure on that, a bit of pressure on this. Not too much pressure because you don't want to break those things. And then you can take this part out as well. So the bottom is out and the top is out. And now we have a fully exposed controller right here. Okay? And what we're going to do is, first of all, in order for you to find out where the overheating is actually taking place, that's actually hidden underneath this board here. So for you to remove this board on the top right here, what you need to do is there are two screws. One goes over here. It's the T6, the one that I talked about a second ago over here. If we come across, there is the T6. This screw actually goes into this hole here, and then also on this side over here. So you will notice another T6 screw right here. Now, how I removed these was by using just the Phillips screwdrivers that I had at home. So as you can see, I don't know exactly which ones these are, but they're really, really small. This one is 2.0 millimeters, so it's a really small one, and I'm assuming this one is even smaller than that, so it might be like 1.5 mm. If you have one of these two, you can do the exact same job as an actual Torx screwdriver, so you don't have to go out and buy one of those. You just put these into the screws and you can force them to open up, and that's exactly how I managed to open up the controller. So once you remove the T6 screwdrivers from both ends, you then need to gently pull this board on the top, but you need to be cautious because if you pull it out too hard, you will actually break these cables here, and you need these cables because these cables, I think they link to the triggers over here. They link to the triggers, and these two cables here, you need to be careful with them as well because they actually link to the vibration bit here, so the controller vibrates. So if you break them, I mean you can remove them, but you need to solder them back in. So that might be actually an issue. It might be long if you don't have a soldering kit. So I wouldn't advise that. So the technique that I used was to gently pull this board from this edge here, and you can do that by just wiggling it a little bit. It's a little bit difficult. Let me just attempt that. Okay, so we're just gonna carry on wiggling. Okay, there we go. So it actually came off, And what you need to do now is we need to be very careful, because I mean, you need to lift this thing up. At the same time, you need to make sure that you don't break these cables apart. So the cables here, they're on both sides. So we have cables here, identical cables. Now, as I mentioned, they are for the triggers and for these vibration rotators, motors, or whatever you want to call them. Okay, so once you lift this this board up. Okay, so the main board that we need to focus on is the board underneath. So the one right here that we can see is the board that we actually need to focus on, because this is where the capacitors are located and the overheating normally take place. And it's normally this section here. So this section that you're seeing, where the D-pad is located on the other side, if you flip the controller around, is where normally the overheating will take place. So what happens is when you plug your micro USB cable into this port here, that sends electrical signal down to the motherboard here on this board, and if there is any sort of problem, what it might do is it will start overheating one of the capacitors, and this capacitor might vary depending on each individual. So in my situation, it was the C33, which is just right here, as you can see. In your case, it might be the C32, or even something over here that might be, might actually be causing the issue. So the capacitors that you need to keep an eye out for are C30, which I think is somewhere here. It's very difficult to show on the camera right here, but it's in this area here. You just need to look out for the labeling C30. In my case, it was the C33 or normally C32. So if it is one of these capacitors, they look like this. This one right here, the one that I removed. So it's one of these, and all you got to do is you need to take a set of pliers or just something solid, and you just need to obviously unsolder it. So just take it out, but make sure you don't put too much pressure on the board or scrape anything here, because these things are very fragile, I would say, in the sense that you want to make sure you don't damage anything else. But once I removed that, the controller was actually restored, and it's fully functioning. It switches back on. It's normally a good idea to go out and actually purchase another capacitor and solder it back in, but I don't think we're going to have any sort of issues, because I mean, obviously there is no safety mechanism on the controller now to restrict the power flow if there is an issue. But I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's just a controller. It's a small controller. It's not gonna, it's not gonna require that much of a huge power draw that I think it should, cause it to explode or catch fire or something as that. But you just need to keep an eye out for it. And I mean, if it starts overheating again, you need to look into the controller and find out if some of the other components might be overheating now. But that was the fix for me, and I'm actually going to demonstrate this now by plugging this into the mains and showing you that the controller does power back on. But right before I do that, I need to reassemble the controller. Just it's safer to do so. You don't want to be plugging this into the mains whilst it's exposed, such as this right here. I mean it could you could get electrocuted or something as that. So it's just safety hazard. Yeah, you just need to be careful of that. So I'm just going to pause the video. I'm going to put this thing back into its case right here, and then we're going to go ahead and plug it into the mains and switch it on and show you that it actually works. So as we can see, I've reassembled the controller back. We have the top case back on it and the bottom case. It's not fully assembled as some of the items are still lying outside, and the screws are not back on. It's just I'm going to test it over the next few days, and then once I'm satisfied with this thing, I'm actually going to put it back together solid. But it was just to quickly show you that on how to reassemble it quickly before you test it using the mains. So for the testing purposes, I'll be plugging this into the mains, and I'm using an Android micro USB cable. So make sure if you have an Android device that it gives you both data and power, it is important to test with one of those cables and plug it into the mains first to test it, see if it powers back on, and if it does, then plug it into your console or your PC to use the controller. So I'm just going to go over to the mains, and we're going to plug this thing in and try to power back on. Okay, so we're over at the mains now. I have the micro USB plugged into the wall using a 3-pin plug adapter, and we're going to go and plug that into the controller and power it on. Okay, we go right there. It vibrated, so that means it's actually working, and there you go. It's powering on now. Although it is blinking because it's not next to a PC or a console, but we will be able to sync this back to the PC and be able to game back on it. Now, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope it helped. If it did, please make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section down below, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. Until next time, peace out.